Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the Tempest and we have made it to Act 2, Scene 1, and today we get to hear from Antonio. There's a lot of relationship stuff that we need to fill you in on. So we already know that Antonio is Prospero's brother, and Antonio is the one that put Prospero and Miranda on a boat and sent them off so that Antonio could become the Duke of Milan, the spot that Prospero once held. So other people that were on that particular boat, because Antonio was on the boat that crashed, as was the King of Naples, who is named Alonso, his son Ferdinand, Alonso's son Ferdinand, who's a Prince of Naples, who we met yesterday, is kind of falling in love with Miranda, and he kind of proposed to her, and he thinks that his dad is dead. Alonso thinks that he is dead because, shipwreck, all of that sort of fun stuff. We have Gonzalo, who is just sort of like a noble person, an advisor, lord type guy, and he's the one that had given food and books and clothing to Prospero and Miranda when they were put on the boat and sent off to be banished. We have Sebastian, who is the king's brother. So Sebastian and Alonso are brothers. And in addition to Alonso having a son, Ferdinand, he has a daughter named Claribel. And this boat was coming from Tunis back to Italy, back presumably to Naples, even though there's some Milanese people on it as well. But going from Tunis to Italy because Claribel had just gotten married to the king of Tunis. So of Alonso's two kids, Ferdinand is separated from his family at the moment physically, but falling in love with Miranda. Claribel is married to the king of Tunis. And this is going to be important in a minute because if you remember, the heredity rules or whatever it is that you call them, the rights of succession, rules of succession, if something were to happen to King Alonso, Ferdinand, being his eldest son, would become king. If something were to happen to Ferdinand, Claribel would become queen. But since those are his only two kids, if something happened to both kids, then Sebastian, being the brother to Alonso, the younger brother, would get to become king. So anyway, we start out Act 2, Scene 1 with all of these people. We've got Francisco and Alonso and Gonzalo and Antonio and all of these people. And they're shipwrecked, they're waking up like on this beach and noticing the world around them. And Gonzalo is trying to be positive about the whole thing. And it's like, oh, isn't this air lovely and all that sort of thing. And everybody else is in just a really foul mood. Antonio and Sebastian are like making snide comments off to the side over here. They're making fun of Gonzalo, stuff like that. Alonso is just convinced that his son is dead, so he's just being a sad sack. He just sort of pipes in every once in a while with like, oh, whoa, my son is gone, or like, hey, shut up, because there's too much happening right now. That sort of a thing. Francisco tries to convince Alonso that Ferdinand could have lived, but Alonso doesn't want to hear it. He's just being a sad sack right now. And Gonzalo keeps going on and on about like how this is a good opportunity, and if he were to set up a kingdom in a place like this is how he would run it. And Antonio and Sebastian just keep making fun of him, and this goes on for a while. It's not super important conversation. There's some fun wordplay that happens in it and all that sort of a thing, but it's basically just they're recognizing that they're on this island, that they don't know where it is. King Alonso's like, we should have never gone to marry her off because now I've lost both of my kids, essentially. And Gonzalo's trying to be happy. Gonzalo notices that all of their clothes are in better condition than he would have expected. He would have thought that all of their clothes would have been stained with salt water, seawater, but that they're not. So he's like, that's kind of weird and cool. And after a little while of this, Ariel comes in, singing a song, playing some music, something like that, that puts everybody to sleep instantly except for Antonio, Sebastian, and Alonso, the king. The other ones all just drop. They're like, whoa, my eyes are heavy. And they literally just pass out, which we know because the other characters are like, whoa, they all fell asleep at the same time. And Alonso's like, yeah, I'm kind of tired too, so I'm gonna, and Antonio and Sebastian are like, we'll keep watch over you while you sleep, so go ahead and rest. So he falls asleep, and now we just have Antonio and Sebastian talking, and Antonio, being a usurper to begin with, because he took the dukedom from his brother and had his brother shipped off to who knows where. Well, we know where, it's this island. Turns to Sebastian, he's like, you know what I see in your future? I see a crown on your head. And Sebastian's like, no, like, that's not my thing. But they get into this little back and forth where Antonio starts pushing Sebastian towards wanting the crown of Naples, towards, this is something that your brother had, but what if something were to happen to your brother? Then, if something happens to your brother, who gets the crown? And Sebastian's like, well, then it would be Ferdinand. And he's like, well, what if something happens to Ferdinand? Then who gets the crown? And he says, well, then it would be Claribel. And Antonio's like, the Claribel that just got married in Tunis, like a different continent? You think that she's going to rule Naples? And Sebastian's like, okay, so there's some space in between Tunis and Naples. And Antonio says, a space whose every cubit seems to cry out, how shall that Claribel measure us back to Naples? Keep in Tunis, and let Sebastian wake. Say this were death that now hath seized them. Why, they were no worse than they are now they are. There be that can rule Naples as well as he that sleeps. Lords that can prate as amply and unnecessarily as this Gonzalo. I myself could make a chuff of his deep chat. Oh, that you bore the mind that I do. What a sleep were this for your advancement. Do you understand me? So he's starting out making the point, like, how is Claribel going to rule Naples from Tunis? Like, because also keep in mind, this is before like cell phones and internet and stuff like that. So if something were to happen in Naples that they needed their queen for, they would have to send a boat with a letter, which would take however long to get there, and then another boat with a letter to get her response back. Like, it's not the best governing situation to have your leader live that far away. So he's like, what could possibly even happen in Naples that people wouldn't just say, oh, don't even bother with Claribel, Sebastian can do it. Sebastian would be fine. And then he goes on to say, there's plenty of other people that could rule Naples just as well as Alonso, who just fell asleep. And what if he had just died instead of just falling asleep? Like, who really would know? I mean, there was this shipwreck and we landed on this island. The rest of the fleet that made it back there probably already thinks that the king is dead. He lost his son. His daughter's married off. Like, who would even really know that he didn't just drop dead right here instead of just falling asleep right here? So do you hear what I'm saying? It's kind of what he says to Sebastian, and Sebastian's like, yeah, I think I get what you're saying. And Antonio's like, so what's your thoughts? And he's like, well, you're the one that usurped your brother's place, aren't you? And Antonio has a little bit more to say about that and the benefits of stealing your brother's position. But that'll be in tomorrow's monologue. So I will see you then for that. Mwah.